Welcome to the session today. My name is Rebecca Bird, and I'm your host for the session today. We are talking about supporting carers at workplace and how some policies can be adapted um, to meet a carer's need. So today we have our lovely Marita joining us today. She's an employee expert. She's an AHR um, expert, and I would let her introduce herself. But before she comes on, I would just like to talk us through what we do at Birdie Box. Birdie Box is a dementia care app, and through that we do support some carers who are struggling with their mental health, who are struggling in their roles. We support them, and we do have a community for carers on Facebook, and it's just a community where you can basically come and share your struggles, your challenges, your wins, and your thought process. Yeah, that is basically what the community is all about. And our Buddy Box Dementia Care app, it's an app that has supported a lot of families here in the UK, and we're looking to extend our reach internationally. And the app's function includes memory bank and reminders, and also an invitation to family and friends and to carers to collaborate on the person's memory loss journey. So the family and friends at different locations can come onto the platform and upload like photos, like music, and all the things that their loved one with dementia needs. And so we have been at this for the past few years now, and we're looking to even expand our reach and to reach out, and to reach more horizons. So yeah, looking forward to that. But today we have a special discussion, and this discussion stemmed from my own personal experience where I was going through a lot in my life. My caregiving role had changed, and the organization I was working with at the time did not know how to support me. And then I went from being a senior um, person in the organization to having to quit my job. And it was one of the most difficult things, I would say, but it's um, it's a journey that I have had to navigate. I've navigated it like relentlessly. I've not given up, and yeah, and with my network, supporting me, supporting my journey, that has been very, very amazing and very interesting, and I can't wait to just continue to share my journey. And for Marita now, she will be sharing all the good stuff. So I would like to yield the floor now to Marita. Marita, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me along. I'm really, really passionate about, I'll explain a little bit more in a little bit more detail what I do, but I'm just on a personal level. I have been a carer to both of my elderly parents. My father actually had dementia, and so I totally get the personal struggles that people go through. My mother had cancer, so yeah, I've been there, been a carer on both sides, and it's not an easy thing to have to balance, as well as being an employee and showing up every day for work and things like that. So let's get started then. So thank you so much again for inviting me along. I'm really, really happy to be here. My name is Maritza. I work with startups and growing businesses to reduce employee turnover, but also to create workplaces that employees actually want to stay in. Now, today's focus obviously is carers. I'm going to share with you a little bit about who they are, why they matter, but also how to support them in the workplace without making it complicated, without needing to spend heaps of money and all of those things. I like to keep things very real and very actionable because, as I mentioned, caring about your people shouldn't feel like a chore. It's also not just about being nice. It's about doing the right thing because it actually makes a huge difference, and it makes sense in the long term for better performance, improved retention, but also from the reputational value as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me just, here we go, there we go. Hopefully that will, can you see that? Perfect, fantastic. So I thought to pull through a little presentation just so that you're not needing to look at just my face. So first of all, let's get clear on who a carer is or who can be a carer. So employees are entitled to unpaid leave to give or arrange care for a dependent who has either a physical or mental illness or injury that needs care for more than 3 months. To care also for a dependent who has a disability as defined in the Equality Act, but also to care for somebody who needs that support due to old age. The dependent, importantly, doesn't have to be a family member. So it could be a neighbour, it could be anyone who relies on that person for care. So that's the basics of who a carer is, just so that we're all on the same page. So very quickly as well, I wanted to go through the legal entitlement. This is what employees are entitled to by law. So from day one, this isn't they've got to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. This is from day one. Employees can take up to 1 week of unpaid carers leave per year. 1 week per year. So a week, though, just to be clear, is however many days work. So for those people who are part-time, if their week is 3 days a week, that would mean that they would take those 3 days that week, right? However, it's 1 week in total, regardless of how many people they care for. And there's also parental leave. So if there is a situation where a child needs care, that individual can get up to 18 weeks. That's a separate issue. This is talking solely about carers. In taking the leave, it's quite a clunky process. There's a minimum of 3 days notice for 1 day or less. You know, the request doesn't need to be in writing. No proof of care is needed, right? So as an employer, you can't say to somebody, I don't believe you. I don't believe that your father had dementia. I don't believe that you've got a disabled child. Whatever they might say, there is no proof needed. Employers can't refuse the request to take that care, but they can ask to reschedule only if the absence would cause serious disruption. And so they need to then, if that's the case, they would need to confirm back to that individual within 7 days in writing. Now, can you see the problem here? It's a little bit too rigid, right? It doesn't really reflect real life. It's not helpful when you need to adapt to a change in circumstances. As we know, things change by the hour, by the minute sometimes when you're caring for someone. And it's just a little bit like, you know, it's just a little bit too rigid. And worst thing is that if you are caring for more than one person, then that's tough because it's the same allowance, right? So if you've got 2 elderly parents, doesn't matter, you can just get a week. So it's just really not very supportive, and it's very transactional. It doesn't take into account any of the other stuff aside from practicalities, like the emotional toll that it can take on someone. Whilst there's also that separate parental leave, you know, that I mentioned about the 18 weeks, it's important to remember that not everyone's caring for a child. It could be an elderly parent, it could be a partner's child, it could be a friend, okay? So the law doesn't always reflect these realities. And, you know, many people as well don't call themselves carers, right? I never used to call myself a carer when I was caring for my parents. So it's just, oh, I'm helping my mum out, I'm taking her to an appointment, or, you know, I'm just doing what any child would do for their parents, right? Which means that they are invisible at work to a certain extent, and they're really hard to identify. Another problem that that exists is that the peak age for being a carer, you know, it coincides when we have to adult, right? When that adulting is difficult, and that can also then coincide with the peak of someone's career, right? So if you think about, you know, it could be sort of mid 40s, early 50s, perhaps even earlier, early 40s. And that's typically once someone's got about, you know, 15, 20 years experience in their field. So they're at the peak of their career. The census of 2021 found that in England and Wales, the highest percentage of unpaid carers was actually among people aged 55 to 59. So they're the people that have got 30 plus years experience, right, in their career. So not only do they have it all going on at work, like it's probably quite crazy, they're in likely a quite senior position, or they might be running their own business, but they've also got all of these challenges of being a carer too. What then happens on top of that, this is my what happens slide, is that we also get misconceptions. So I'll share a few things that I've heard, but also that I know happens, is that, oh, we don't have carers here. You know, that's the classic business owner or senior leader response, right? Whereas actually Carers UK found in 2019 that there are around 4.87 million people juggling both work and care in the UK. So that is 1 in 7 of all workers. So statistically, you do have carers in your business, right? But it's impossible that you don't. Another misconception is, oh, they'll just let us know if they need help. Actually, they won't. They're scared of being judged, of having, you know, of being stigmatized, or the fact that, you know, if they're at that peak of their career, they just keep quiet because they're worried about what that's going to mean for them. And so it's even harder to identify these people. Another misconception is, oh, you know, it's a personal issue, that doesn't matter, you know, we're here to work. Well, actually, you know, when it leads to things like stress and burnout and resignations and, you know, overwhelm, that is definitely a business issue. It's the person that's coming to work, and that person has other stuff going on outside of work. So it's definitely a business issue. Another misconception, oh, they only need time off for emergencies. Well, yeah, okay, maybe that's true, but actually it might be needed more often, or equally for things like just the daily routine. So not just the odd hospital appointment or the emergency. Somebody caring may have a whole second job almost, or a second shift to come home to after they finish a day's work. And then final misconception, which is the one that really gets on my nerves, is, oh, how do I know it's genuine and they're not taking the piss? Now, there's quite a lot to unpack here, but very simply, if you don't trust these people, they probably shouldn't be in your team in the first place, is one way I'd respond to that. But also, you know, support your people in good faith. You're not employed to be a detective. It's not a good use of your time as a business leader to be, or manager, or whatever role you're in, to be trying to find out, actually, is that person genuinely disabled that they're caring for, or do they have a genuine caring need? Good faith goes a long way, and people will typically, if you give them that trust, they will also trust you back. And yeah, that's how I respond to that. So the final box on this slide is the result. So what happens because of these problems that I mentioned about how clunky the whole statutory legal entitlement is, the misconceptions that happen, is that actually 600 people in the UK quit work every day because they can't juggle work and care. Now, that's a stat from Carers UK. So there's not only a really strong moral obligation to support working carers, but there's a strong economic imperative too, right? According to, again, from Carers UK, the top 3 things that would most help working carers are a supportive employer or line manager, flexible working, and additional paid care leave. Notice that the additional paid care leave is at the bottom of that list, and what they actually need is support. And that's a really, really easy thing to fix, and doesn't cost a lot of money either. So the answers are right there, okay, of what we need to be doing better, like in terms of employers and supporting carers. But let's dive in a little deeper to answer some more specific questions. And that was my little figure that I forgot was there, because actually that's what happens, is that people get so upset and so stressed out that they quit. So let's dive into answer some more specific questions. So number 1 is, how can companies proactively identify employees who are also family caregivers without infringing on privacy? Now, this is a really big concern, because obviously you don't want to be seen as prying, right? And the best way that you can do this is to basically create a culture that encourages those individuals to come forward, to self-identify, and where people feel safe to share. So if you openly show support for employees in general, more so for carers, then they're more likely to raise the hand. That's the thinking that sits behind this. So when people see that support is normal, regardless of what you're going through in your life and in your employment, then they're more likely to come forward. So some practical steps, because I'm all about the practical stuff, and these are non-intrusive, and they're also relatively low cost or no cost. Okay, so number 1 is advertise that you're a flexible and supportive workplace. Tell people that you're carer friendly, and if you need to, call it out in your recruitment materials, on your adverts and things like that. Make sure that you're advertising as well the support that's available, and that, again, that could be either in your recruitment materials and your adverts. It could also be on your intranet or any documentation that people receive as they're going through the interview and onboarding process and before they start working with you. So just shout about it. Number 2, so it actually points to onboarding. So ask about carer responsibilities in your onboarding, in new hire forms. Obviously make it an optional answer, because sometimes people may still not feel comfortable despite the fact that you've shouted about it. But, you know, a simple question is, do you have regular responsibilities caring for someone? And that could be something that's asked in their first one-to-one with their manager. It could also be asked at interview. It could, you know, be careful about asking it at an interview. But if it's positioned from a place of, we want to support you, and it will help open up those conversations really early on. So you, as the employer, are opening the door rather than asking them to push it open, right? Number 3, communicate regularly about benefits, specifically the carer support ones. So post it on your intranet or mention it in all staff emails. If you send like a newsletter to your employees, maybe even if you're sending out, you know, as payslips get sent out or something like that via email, if that's a thing. You know, if you're juggling work with caring for someone, here's what we offer. Maybe make it part of something that you communicate regularly to your people. List things like what's available to them, right? So things like flexible hours, somebody starting a bit later, finishing a bit later, or even splitting their day in half so that they do a session in the morning, a session in the afternoon, you know, something like that. Remote work options. Most jobs that can be done remotely don't need to be sat in an office. If you make the effort to make it work, managing somebody when they're not in the same room as you, it can work really, really well, especially when someone has this caring responsibility as well. Shout about any carer leave policy or any kind of policy that you have to support carers. When people see that that support is available and celebrated, they feel much safer stepping forward. So that's where you're creating that culture of support and safety. And it signals to them, hey, it's okay to let us know if you're a carer. This is all right. We'll talk about it, you know. And finally, you know, you could do things like supporting Carers Week and celebrating it in June. It is usually. So calling it out within your business, making it a regular thing that you talk about, but also maybe encouraging existing carers to come forward and share their experience. And, you know, they can share as little or as much as they want to. They don't have to go into the ins and outs if they don't feel comfortable doing so. But imagine how powerful it can be for a senior leader, like a COO, like a CEO, or like a director, or somebody in that kind of position to step forward and say, look, you know, I had this challenge when I was supporting my XYZ person, and actually this is what we're able to do. And if this is resonating with you, if you feel that you're in a similar position, please step forward, have a chat with your manager, those kinds of things. What I would say is just be mindful about putting anyone on the spot, because that will erode any trust that you're trying to build. And ultimately, what you're trying to do here is to prioritize carers, but making it okay for people to talk about things happening outside of work, and making it okay to ask for help, and that it's not a weakness to ask for help. Yeah, that there is a support network within work. So, other question that I've had around carers is, what practical steps can people managers take to spot early signs of caregiver burnout and to open up a supportive dialogue? So I've got some warning signs here on the right. These can include things like increased absence and lateness, low energy, low enthusiasm, drop in focus or performance, but also changes in behavior. So this could be a shorter fuse, it could be that they're withdrawing, it could be that they are doing other things that aren't characteristic of that individual. They might be just acting slightly differently. Okay, so for people managers, the steps that you can take really are the first thing is to be observant, and also to make sure that you are approachable. So regardless of whether somebody's a carer or not, building a really strong relationship with your team is the best thing that you can do. And that's not because you want them to see you as their mate and that they can have a drink with you down the pub. It's because actually when you're building that relationship, they will feel comfortable putting their hand up, asking a question, seeking help, whatever it might be. And the more observant you are, and the more you've built that relationship, you can be more observant and see when things are changing. So you're able to, you know, you keep your ears and eyes open, and basically then say, hey, look, you know, actually I'm seeing that this is happening, you know, or perhaps even if an employee says, oh, you know, actually my sister isn't well, you can respond in a friendly, private way, right? Don't do it in front of everyone, because people might not want to talk about it, they might get upset. You're protecting that relationship between the two of you, and you're protecting the fact that that person stepped forward, they're being a bit vulnerable and sharing what's going on with you. But privately, you could say, look, I'm so sorry to hear that, thank you so much for sharing it with me. What does that mean for you? And then let them share. You know, what does that, you know, what does that look like? Somebody might just need to finish work 5-10 minutes early, but you don't know. So don't try and solve before you know what it actually means. And the important thing is to empathize. So saying something like, I can understand it must be difficult for you, or I can't imagine how you must be feeling, but I want to support you. So please let me know what you need from me, what flexibility you need. Can you put yourself in that person's shoes and think about how they might start feeling when somebody says that to them in the workplace? It's like, okay, I can calm down. I'm not being judged here. My manager has opened up that conversation. I can push that door open and then ask for what I need. It's not prying, and it's not and you can actually, you can call that out and just say, look, I'm not wanting to pry, I just want to support you. So that's super important, and it's creating the space for the employee to share more if they want to. So check in privately, as I say, do it in your one-to-one meetings. Don't do that in a public forum. If you're not having one-to-one meetings, then I cannot tell you how important it is that you meet with your employee at least once a week. Okay, not just for caring, but for the carer side of things, but for more than just that. It's so important. Ask open questions. Hey, how you doing? I've noticed this. What's going on for you? Open that door, don't judge or tell them what to do. That can be really challenging. They may want to get your advice or your opinion on it. A really helpful question that I say is like, okay, what do you need what do you need from me here? Do you just want a pair of ears? Do you want me to help you come to, find a solution? Just ask them what their support, what support they need. What they will be wanting is to feel heard, and they'll also probably not want to burden you with stuff. So just bear that in mind, and just say, look, I've got this time, let's talk about it. If you want to, I'm here, I can listen, so that they can share in confidence. Reassurance is super important throughout this. Okay, I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you. I am here to support you. I want to help make things easier here. What would be the most helpful thing for you? And be ready to offer some solutions. Okay, they might not know what's open and what's available to them, right? It's like a little bit of a buffet or a menu. You could make the suggestion of flexible hours, compressed working weeks. Can you tweak some workload? Can you just, are there things that are causing that individual more stress that actually you could even perhaps swap with one of their colleagues? So they're taking on something that their colleague is doing, freeing up their time, but actually it's something that they find really enjoyable and less stressful. And so the thing that they do find really stressful, it could be that actually they just don't want to talk to people and they've got to call customers. And actually, you could do a little swap of that for a period of X number of months or whatever it might be. But that's the kind of tweaks that you can be making that isn't just the sort of start early, finish late, or start early, finish early, or working hours tweaks. Sometimes it might just be that they just need that space for someone to listen. Okay. But ultimately, by doing all of this, you're saying it's okay to ask for help, and make sure that they know that whatever you're talking about in that room remains confidential, because there's nothing worse and there's nothing that's going to erode that trust that you've built faster than them feeling that actually they're the talk of the town because you're talking about it with other people. Clearly, if somebody is potentially at risk, or they're harming themselves or things like that, that's a different scenario. But typically when we're talking about a carer situation, it may just be that they need to just be heard. So and the final thing as well, so the confidentiality is important, but also the final thing is that whatever you agree to action, make sure that actually happens and it's done. So whether it's reduced duties or different working days or a day from week, it needs to be acted on, actually put in place and respected. Because again, there's nothing worse than you having all of these discussions and then saying, oh yeah, we're going to do this, but then the person is still needing to come into the office on that one day a week because stuff hasn't been rearranged and there's still deadlines and responsibilities and stuff like that. It's just really unhelpful, and it's a colossal waste of time as well. So that's what I would recommend for people managers. So next up, the next question that we had is around how can organizations create safe channels for carers to request support without that fear of stigma or any career repercussions, right? So this is about creating that wider feeling of psychological safety. So making it okay for people to speak up when they need to, which we've talked about already, But these are some simple things that can be really impactful. Now, the first piece is people manager training. It is the single most impactful thing that you could invest in as an employer to make sure that your people managers know how to be a successful people manager in your organization, but B, how, it means that everyone is getting the same experience. Effective people manager training can help focus on the behaviors that are needed to create that open and transparent workplace that supports its people. This is one where you might have to spend a little bit of money, but it doesn't need to break the bank. Next up is a policy on carers leave. This will include things like what support is available, what tailored support could look like, what adjustments could look like in the workplace. Again, it's that giving some ideas and that people know that actually, oh, I didn't even know that was an option for me to do. That can be very, very helpful. There's typically not much of a cost with creating a policy, but there may very well be, you never know. So it's just one thing to consider if you are trying to do this on a bit of a budget. An employee assistance program can also be really, really helpful. Or alternatively, you could have a mental health first aider as an added layer of support. Now, it's important not to confuse the two. An employee assistance program isn't what a mental health first aider would do and vice versa. Just how you have, I'm a mental health first aider myself, and just how you have physical first aiders, that's what the equivalent is for a mental health first aider. So don't expect a physical first aider to be able to perform brain surgery. Okay, they're there as an initial response and an initial help and able to signpost. An employee assistance program might be a bit more comprehensive. What you might want to think about is sometimes with different types of employer liability insurance or other types of insurance that you get as a business, an employee assistance program is often provided, or they can add it on for like a reduced fee. So it's just another added layer there of support. Again, making it really comfortable, making people feel really comfortable to ask for support. Like I said, senior leaders and employees speaking openly about their experiences of being a carer and the support that was put in place for them, how they were then also reintegrated back. So when their carer needs changed, if perhaps they were able to swap with a family member or something, or the need just diminished after that 3-month period, like what did it look like when they were coming back into the workplace properly, like fully again? And just really reiterating that there is no judgment. Yeah. And I think talking about what it looks like coming back to my original job in its original guise gives an indication that actually I'm not going to suffer because I've had to take some time out to look after my mum or whoever. So that's about creating a safe space. You'll see that there's some really, really common themes of what I'm talking through here, actually, but it is really that simple. Ultimately, you can't necessarily solve a problem that you don't know. So what you want to be doing is opening that door in the first instance, okay? And the best time to do it is onboarding. So the next question that I wanted to cover here is how should organizations integrate carer-friendly policies and their education on carers and how carer-friendly they are into onboarding. So 3 key things, very much the same as existing employees through the business, but number 1 is speaking up openly about carers and the supportive carer network and environment in your recruitment efforts, on job adverts, your careers page. Make it part of your employee value proposition. And if you don't know what that is, that's the bit of that's the kind of narrative around why somebody should come and work for you as a business. Okay, so these are the reasons why new employees and prospective employees should join your business, but also the reasons that keep your existing people happy and engaged. That's what an employee value proposition is in a very small nutshell. But yeah, ask people as they join in onboarding, put it in the induction slides. There's nothing better than, when I've run induction sessions, of being able to share, hey, this is who we are as a business, but actually this is how we care for our people, regardless of what's going on for them in their life. It could be a maternity policy, it could be a paternity policy, whatever it might be. You know, carer leave is just as important. Tell your new people that if their situation ever changes, it might be that they're not a carer there and then, but if their situation changes, that there are a number of opportunities for them to get the support through work and to readdress that balance that sometimes can go off when you start caring for somebody, when those responsibilities increase. Remind your employees by those ongoing communications, those regular communications about, hey, here's what's available to you, don't forget about it. Yeah, doing that re-communication about benefits and provisions for employees at regular points is so important, because there's oftentimes a lot of focus placed on the onboarding versus the actual day-to-day stuff. And it's like, oh, well, they're here now, they should know that. But it's always good to remind people. And again, remind people what's available. So treat it like standard information, just how you would share, you know, what annual leave entitlement they're eligible for, what their pension contributions are, you know, what benefits they're entitled to. It's important to remind people of this stuff. Keep on hammering that message through, banging the drum for, you know, your carer provisions. So that was what I was going to cover today, but just a very, very quick recap before we finish. So recognize that basically anybody can be a carer. You do not know that, okay? So what you need to do is just make it easy, reduce that friction, you know, for somebody to be able to step up and, you know, and identify as a carer and say that they need help. Carers aren't this tiny, unknown, rare group of people. They are in every workplace. They're everywhere. And being a carer is not just a personal issue. It's, you know, the person has a job in your business and it's the right thing to do to support them, but not only because it's the right thing to do on a personal level, commercially, you know, when people bring their whole selves to work, they are more productive, they're happier, they feel like they belong somewhere and they feel welcome, supported and things like that. If they're struggling, their attention isn't going to be on how to do their job in the best possible way. Their attention is going to be on, oh my God, I've got so much work to do and I've got to have it finished in 5 minutes because I've then got to run out the door to go and collect such and such, go and take them to an appointment, go and whatever it might be that they are, they're also, you know, that person that they're caring for. An employee's carer role, it impacts their work life in so many ways that we just do not know. Many carers face stress, exhaustion, schedule conflicts, you know, from their actual workload and things like that. So without support, they can often reduce their hours without even, you know, saying anything. They can also just leave. And then you've got the cost of trying to replace them. And that's where people like me get involved, because I help businesses to do that, to stop that. So carers won't speak up and ask for help. They might want to keep their situation private because of fear of stigma. You know, there are still certain scenarios around, especially mental ill health, things like psychoses and things like that, which are hugely involving and hugely disruptive, but actually really not very well understood. And so they might not want to be, you know, talked about, oh, you know, such and such, they're dealing with somebody who's having psychosis and things like that, you know. They don't want to air their laundry in public. And so that's, you know, you've got to sort of respect that people will want to share with you as much as they want to share and not try and push. So yeah, there we go. So you know, talk about it if nobody's asked. Train your managers to spot stress early. Make support really easy to find. Make it not awkward. Reduce the friction around somebody putting their hand up and saying, yeah, I need help. Shout about it at onboarding, again as a reminder to your existing people. But ultimately, supporting carers is how you build trust, loyalty, and a workplace that actually works. And all this helps towards retaining your people, which is significantly cheaper than trying to replace them when they leave because they feel unsupported. So that was all I was going to cover in my presentation. My contact details are here. If anyone, I'm wearing the same top in that picture. If anyone wants to drop me a message, please do. My email address is there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. If any of this has resonated with you, then obviously please do. And then really there's just some time for questions. I hope I've left enough time and not gone on for too long.
Yes, you really have blown away my mind or my brain.
I hope in a good way.
Yes, in a very, very good and positive way. And I feel like these are things that I wish I knew before I quit my job, because I would have done a bit more, not just for myself, but for other people who might have been going through the same thing like
Yeah.
I was going through. And yeah, I really wish but I can at this time now connect you to the organization and say to them, I think these are some of the lessons that you should learn from Marita. She will sort you out. Yeah. So thank you so much.
One other thing, sorry, because just really that actually has just struck me as you said, I wish I'd have known some of this stuff. A very, very useful resource for employees around what your entitlement is the Gov UK website. They will have the most up-to-date information there. So if you are in a situation where you are working for a challenging employer and they're saying, oh no, we can't support you, or they're saying things that just, it might be that they're not quite there yet in terms of that opening the door, all of that stuff. But if they're saying things like, no, you can't have it, full stop, and you've got to wait until you've worked here for 6 months, go onto the Gov UK website, and then actually you can go in, with the knowledge that actually I know what I'm entitled to.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, I think that is really, really important. But yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're most welcome.
That. Yeah, and I feel like this is what a lot of HR managers, this is what they need to know. This is what they need to know about. And I feel like the small organizations now are starting to catch up. But the corporates, the well-established ones, they are still here and there. So
it's really interesting actually that you say that. Yeah, because from experience I've seen it the other way around. More in the sense that there's typically a lot more structure in the larger corporates, and they have considered all of these other policies, let's say, and practices that aren't necessarily just the standard. But that said, there is typically less knowledge in the smaller organizations. But also there is usually, especially when you're looking at things like startups and scale ups where everything's so fast paced, there's usually a lot more flexibility that's afforded to people and to employees there. So I think I wouldn't stereotype as such. I think either a business gets it, regardless of the size, either they get it or they don't. And either they are that supportive kind of environment, which is always what I push, regardless of size, or what I always push my clients certainly to work on is that, it makes sense, not just because you're doing the right thing, because they're a human being, but also because actually commercially it makes sense as well. So, yeah.
Wow. Great. So this goes to our first question for the day. And I hope you are excited. Because
I love a good question.
So this question, the person wrote and said, I've been a carer for my child, and my organization has generally been understanding about the time and flexibility I need for that role. Recently, though, I've become unwell myself. While the company's culture is supportive, my direct manager has expressed that since I already receive flexibility to care for my child, he doesn't feel he can extend the same level of understanding for my own health needs. So the person
Mm.
is asking, this has left me feeling like I have to choose between caring for my child and caring for myself. What
Yeah.
can you say about that?
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. Because obviously the needs will be different, right? The carer needs are different to your own personal needs. And so it's difficult to say fully without knowing the whole detail of, you know, what's going on. But what I would encourage that individual to do is to try and open up a dialogue with their manager again about, actually, this is what I have in place now, but this is what's changed, and almost to go to that meeting with a few suggestions of what that could look like. And you may have to a little bit demonstrate that thing of, I'm trying to meet you in the middle here, of like, actually, you know, this is what worked for me, this is what actually I just need a little bit more, this is what would work for me now, and see if you can open up that dialogue again. So they're not, it sounds like they might be resisting that, opening that door. It might be that actually you need to just go and push it with some suggestions of, look, you know, this is what I've got currently, actually can I juggle things around and have this instead, or this. So maybe 2 or 3 options. And I know it's difficult and they should be more forthcoming, but sometimes you need to do that as well yourself, and almost take the lead.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that beautiful response. So another question. Yeah, the second question says, can you share? And I think this goes back to when you were saying that you didn't see yourself as a carer for so long, and it was really hard for you. Yeah, and I think every unpaid carer has that same testimony where you don't even acknowledge yourself as a carer
Yeah.
until you get into a situation and the person is saying to you, you are actually a carer. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not a carer. I'm just supporting. But yeah, so this question says, can you share a story of when a colleague or employee faced a sudden or unexpected caregiving responsibility that they have always been in, but never understood how to share this with the organization due to stigmatization?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a really interesting one. And I'm trying to think back. I might have to come back to that one if that's all right, just because I'm trying to think of when that's happened. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to come back to that one.
No worries at all. Yeah, no worries. I've got another one that says, can you recall where the leadership, so you mentioned that, you know, it would be good if the leadership, maybe if there is a carer in the leadership team, and how it would be good for them to take the lead on caring policies and all of that. So this person wants to know that in a situation where the leadership team do not understand the need to support caregivers, what do you think the ripple effect would be on the workplace culture and employee engagement?
So if I've understood that question correctly, it's like where senior leadership don't see the value in supporting their carers and what the impact of that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the impact is that people will just think with their feet and they'll leave, right? If they don't find that support there, they will leave, or worse still, because not everyone can just go, oh, sod this, I'm out, because there's a financial element, right? Worse still is that they feel that they have no option but to continue working in an environment that actually is probably adding to their stress. And can you see like the pressure that then gets on, you know, that person is going through? They're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? They've got to care for their loved one, whoever that might be, but they're also in a situation where they don't get that support, that flexibility, and they can't leave because they don't have something else to go to. They need the money. You know, not many people can afford that luxury of just quitting. So yeah, I mean, worst case is that people resign for that organization, but then for the individual, it's just like, how long's a piece of string? You know, you've got pressure of caring, pressure of finances, pressure of, you know, I've got to still carry on doing my job. You know, I'd be saying to that person in that scenario of like, actually, you know what you are entitled to and push for it. And yeah, there's flexible working requests that you can submit and things like that to try and alleviate that pressure. But yeah, those are the two main consequences, I guess, of not addressing it. And then of course, from a business perspective, you know, if you've got people leaving constantly because they don't feel supported, you know, turnover costs a lot of money. It can cost anything between 3 months to 2 years worth of a role's salary, depending on the complexity of that role, the seniority of that role, to then replace it. So if you have a sudden exodus of people, not only are your productivity is going to shrink massively, you've got a steady stream of people leaving, you're also then going to have the added cost of trying to replace those people. You know, just one role based on the average UK salary, it can cost £17,500 to replace due to employee turnover. So you can see that, you know, it makes, that's why I'm saying it makes so much more commercial sense to try and support these people, because actually you're very unlikely going to have to spend £17,500 to help that carer be able to care for their loved one, right? But actually it's likely to going to cost you that much to then replace them.
Wow, yeah, I think you've covered all the questions that I wanted to ask, and just one more.
Yeah, I was going to say, apart from the one question that you asked me that I couldn't respond
Apart
to,
from
do you know, I genuinely haven't had a scenario where I've had somebody afraid to step up. And I'm not saying that because I'd always support people, but I think that I've been very lucky to work in some organisations where actually it is supported, or there has been a solution. I think, though, if I was to speak hypothetically about what kind of thing could become stigmatized, is the type of challenge that the person they are caring for is dealing with. So, you know, if we think about things like I said, psychoses or some mental ill health conditions, possibly even something like, you know, if it, again, this is going into the childcare aspect, but, you know, where potentially there are children who are somewhere on a spectrum and they are seen as disruptive and what have you, where they've met them and there's been a family gathering, you know, family and company gathering or something like that. That's the sort of thing that could potentially happen, and you might get people saying, oh well, they're just misbehaving or what have you. But yeah, the other things as well could be where if somebody has a sort of chronic disease that comes with some stigma on its own, that then the employee by association gets that you know, stigmatized as well. Yeah, those are the kinds of scenarios that I can think of. It's not necessarily ones that I've experienced, though.
Yeah, and I do agree with you, because I feel like it differs Yeah, it differs, and also the type of of ailment
Mm.
or something that the person who is experiencing it has. I
Hmm.
think it also um, makes the caring responsibility light lighter
Yeah.
or heavier.
Yes,
I
absolutely,
think.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And something I guess the other thing that I didn't mention is the career piece of like, oh, if somebody is we didn't talk about that side of the stigma,
Mm,
because it's not just the condition, it's also the what could that mean for them as in their career. Like if it's a chronic disease or a chronic illness or a chronic issue, which typically things that are over 3 months, they're highly likely to fall in that category. It's that thing of, oh, actually they're just always going to need this time off, and actually will they be able to be here, will they be able to take on more responsibility, can we
mm,
promote them, can we this, can we that, there's that kind of stigma as well. Not saying that it's okay by any means, but
mm,
that is something that could be seen too.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think this conversation, it is a conversation that organizations need to have regularly, and
Mm,
I do agree with you when when you mention about reminding staff of the things that are in place, so
yeah,
that they don't feel that, oh, there is nothing here for me, let me just be, yeah, let me just struggle and go through these challenges on
yeah,
my own, which is not
yeah,
supposed to be, it's not
yeah.
supposed to be. So
No,
yeah.
and it could be that, look, if that person has aspirations to be promoted into a certain
Mm,
position, and actually part of that position means that there are certain requirements that that individual can't fulfill just
mm,
because of their caring needs. It's like,
mm,
okay, well, we know that that's what you want to do, but given what you've already got on your plate, it's not, having that open conversation about it not being feasible, that's also okay,
mm,
because actually you're behaving like adults. You're not saying, oh no, you can't do this because actually you've got to do this. You
yeah.
can't, it's not feasible. Let's look at what else is. Given that
Mm,
that's what your aspiration is,
mm,
let's look at other opportunities where you can get a similar
mm,
experience, similar development, but actually, it means that you're benefiting.
mm,
We're not putting you in a situation where actually we're setting you up to fail, because
mm,
that could be a reality.
mm,
And yeah, it's just having that discussion, and coming to the table as adults, and shifting that balance that's so often seen in the employee-employer relationship, isn't it? There's always a balance of power, and it's about how you, as the employer, can shift that as much as possible. Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you so very much,
You're
Marita.
most welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope
Insights.
that was helpful.
Thank you. Like, yeah, I have just been blown away. Like, yeah,
Oh,
thank you so very
amazing.
much.
I'm really pleased.
Yeah, and it started from you and I just having a normal
It
conversation
did,
and talking
yeah.
about our experiences to to this webinar.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's been
absolutely.
incredible. Yeah, it's been
Oh,
incredible. Thank you
so
very much.
pleased. So
Yeah,
pleased it hit the mark. Yeah, chuffed.
yeah. You are excited. Yeah, I can see that you're very high right now. So
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we really, really, really do appreciate you. And yeah, thank you to everyone who has joined us. Thank you to Marita for coming on to this webinar and sharing a lot with us. And I really hope that, you know, many people would take this on board and really start to change things around for their carers. Like me, for instance, my full job is being a carer. My full-time role
Mm.
is being a carer. So being a senior, being being in a senior role, it was for me like a part-time job. So
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to check out at the end because he was the best thing for me and for my mental health as well. And yeah, I just realizing too that you can't do everything by yourself, and
Mm.
sometimes you need help. Sometimes you just need to check out. Sometimes the support is there. Yeah, so I really hope that this has been helpful to someone. And please do leave your likes, your comments in the comment section. Thank you so much once again, Marita, and enjoy the
You're
rest of
most
your day.
welcome.
Have a
And
good
you. And
weekend.
you.
Bye
And
bye.
speak soon. Bye bye.